My name is Robert, and I need to tell you what happened last Christmas. What started as a simple holiday conversation turned into the most painful yet liberating experience of my 67 years. I remember driving to Michael's house that cold December morning, my hands gripping the steering wheel of my old Honda Civic. The heater barely worked, but I didn't mind. I was excited about Christmas plans, about cooking my famous sage-stuffed turkey that Michael had loved since he was 8 years old. That recipe came from his mother, my dear Sarah, who passed 3 years ago from cancer. The house looked beautiful from the outside. Two-story colonial with a white picket fence, manicured lawn, and that oak tree we planted together when Michael was 12. I had helped make this dream possible, though he didn't know the full extent of my sacrifices yet. Michael answered the door in his pajamas, coffee mug in hand. At 32, he still had that boyish face, but something seemed different, distant. "Hey, Dad, come in." I followed him to the kitchen, where Jessica was feeding little Emma her breakfast. My daughter-in-law barely looked up, her blonde hair perfectly styled even at 9 in the morning. She had that effortless beauty that came with privilege, something I never quite understood but always respected. "Good morning, Jessica," I said warmly. She nodded without smiling. "Robert." Never Dad, or even Mr. Thompson. Always just Robert, like I was a neighbor she barely tolerated. I sat across from them at the granite island I had helped pay for, watching Emma smear oatmeal on her high chair. At 3 years old, she was my whole world, my little sunshine with Sarah's green eyes. "So," I began enthusiastically, "I've been thinking about Christmas dinner. I could come over early, help with the preparations. Maybe make that sage stuffing Emma loves, and of course the turkey. I've been perfecting the recipe, adding some rosemary this year." The silence that followed felt heavy. Michael and Jessica exchanged a look I couldn't quite decipher. "Dad," Michael started slowly, "we need to talk about Christmas." My stomach dropped. Something in his tone warned me this wasn't going to be the conversation I expected. "What about it?" Jessica finally looked at me directly, her blue eyes cold. "My parents are coming for Christmas this year. They're flying in from Connecticut." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely happy. "It'll be nice for Emma to have both sets of grandparents together." Another silence. Another look between them. "The thing is, Dad," Michael continued, "they're not really comfortable with, well, they think it might be better if it's just immediate family this year." I blinked, confused. "But I'm immediate family. I'm Emma's grandfather." "You know what I mean," he said, avoiding my eyes. No, I didn't know what he meant. But Jessica was quick to clarify. "My parents prefer a more intimate setting. They're not used to, well, mixing different types of people during the holidays." Different types of people. The words hit me like a slap. I looked around the kitchen at the stainless steel appliances, the custom cabinets, the marble countertops. All of it possible because of my sacrifices, my loans, my refinance house. "I see," I said quietly. But I didn't see. Not yet. That understanding would come later, in waves of painful clarity that would change everything between us forever. I left their house in a daze, my hands shaking as I started the car. The drive home was a blur of suburban streets and stop signs, but my mind was crystal clear for the first time in years. As I pulled into my modest driveway, the contrast hit me like a punch to the gut. My house was small, a 1960s ranch that needed new siding and a roof repair I couldn't afford. Sarah and I had bought it when Michael was born, planning to upgrade someday. But someday never came, especially not after Sarah got sick. I sat in my living room, surrounded by furniture from the 1990s and family photos in mismatched frames. The silence was deafening. This was when the calculations started, the mental math I had avoided for 5 years. It began with Michael's wedding. $25,000 for the down payment on their house. I had refinanced my mortgage to make it happen, extending my payments well into my 70s. "Just temporary, Dad," he had said. "We'll pay you back once Jessica finishes her master's degree." Then came the monthly mortgage payments. $2,000 every month for 5 years. I did the math, $168,000. Plus the original down payment, that was $193,000. But there was more. The car loan when Jessica's Honda died during her pregnancy, $18,000. The medical bills when Emma was born and their insurance had a high deductible, $8,000. The credit card debt they accumulated during Michael's brief unemployment, $12,000. Always with promises to pay me back, always temporary. I walked to my kitchen and opened the cabinet where I kept my financial documents. Loan agreements, bank statements, receipts, all carefully organized in manila folders. The evidence of my generosity, my stupidity, my unconditional love. The total was staggering, $231,000 over 5 years. Nearly $250,000. I thought about my own life during those years. The generic groceries instead of brand names. The thermostat set at 65 degrees to save on heating bills. The medical appointments I postponed because the copays added up. The vacation with Sarah we never took because the money went to Michael's family instead. Sarah had been worried before she died. Robert, she had whispered during one of her last lucid moments, don't let them take advantage of your good heart. I had shushed her, told her to rest, that Michael was family and family helped each other. But sitting in my shabby living room, calculator in hand, I realized Sarah had seen what I was too blind to see. This wasn't family helping family. This was me funding their lifestyle while they looked down on mine. I remembered Jessica's comments over the years. Little digs about my outdated furniture, my simple meals, my unfashionable clothes. The way she redirected conversations when I shared stories about my work as a maintenance supervisor, as if my 40-year career was something embarrassing. I thought about holidays past, how Jessica always found excuses to visit her parents in Connecticut instead of celebrating with me. How Michael gradually stopped calling unless he needed something. How Emma barely knew me despite living 20 minutes away. The hurt was transforming into something else. Something cleaner, sharper, clarity. I had been so focused on being the generous father, the helpful grandfather, that I had never noticed I was being treated like a bank. A convenient ATM with no feelings, no dignity, no worth beyond my ability to write checks. The realization settled over me like a heavy blanket. For the first time in 5 years, I saw the situation clearly. Tomorrow, I would start making some changes. The phone rang at 7:30 that evening. I was heating up a frozen dinner, still processing the morning's events, when Jessica's name appeared on the caller ID. Robert, we need to clarify something, she began without any greeting. Her voice had that practiced tone she used when talking to service workers or subordinates. What's that, Jessica? Michael feels terrible about how this morning went. He thinks you might have misunderstood. I stayed silent, curious to hear how she would spin this. The thing is, my parents are very particular about holiday traditions. They come from old Connecticut money, you understand. Very established family. My father went to Yale, my mother to Vassar. They're used to a certain level of sophistication. Still, I said nothing. It's not personal, Robert. It's just that your cooking is very simple. Basic. My mother is quite the gourmet, and she tends to be critical of food that doesn't meet her standards. We thought it would be awkward. Simple. Basic. The words stung, but I was beginning to see the pattern. And honestly, she continued, her voice gaining confidence, you wouldn't be comfortable anyway. The conversation tend to be about things like art, literature, travel to Europe. My father knows 3 languages. My mother serves on the board of the Connecticut Symphony. She paused, as if this impressive resume proved her point. You're a maintenance worker, Robert. There's nothing wrong with that, of course, but you just wouldn't fit in. It would be uncomfortable for everyone. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. 40 years keeping buildings running, solving problems, managing teams of skilled technicians, and she reduced it to maintenance worker like I was someone who mopped floors. I see, I managed. I'm glad you understand. Oh, and Robert? About Sarah. My dead wife's name in her mouth made my blood pressure spike. What about Sarah? Well, my parents know she didn't go to college. They know she worked as a secretary. They find it difficult to relate to people from such different backgrounds. It's not their fault, really. They're just products of their upbringing. The line went quiet except for my own breathing. Michael told them some stories about her cooking disasters over the years. Remember that Thanksgiving, when she burned the turkey? They found it quite amusing. How you burn a turkey, my mother said. Don't these people use timers? These people. She actually said these people. Jessica, I said quietly, let me ask you something. Of course. Who's been paying your mortgage for the past 5 years? The silence stretched so long, I wondered if the call had dropped. That's different, Robert. That's family helping family. That doesn't change anything about social compatibility. Social compatibility, I repeated. Exactly. Look, you're a nice man, but you're not sophisticated. You shop at discount stores, you drive that old car, you live in that tiny house. My parents summer in the Hamptons. They winter in Palm Beach. These are different worlds. I was quiet for so long, she must have thought she had convinced me. So we're all clear then? You'll find something else to do for Christmas? Maybe visit that sister of yours in Ohio. Crystal clear, Jessica. Wonderful. I knew you'd understand. You're very reasonable when you want to be. After she hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time. The frozen dinner had gone cold, but I didn't care. Something fundamental had shifted inside me. The hurt was crystallizing into something much more powerful. I walked to my computer and logged into my online banking. The automatic transfer to their mortgage account was scheduled for tomorrow, just like it had been every month for 5 years. For the first time since this arrangement began, I was going to miss a payment. Deliberately, I canceled the automatic transfer at 6:47 a.m. 3 clicks on my laptop screen, and 5 years of financial sacrifice came to an end. The confirmation email arrived instantly. Automatic payment canceled successfully. For the first time in months, I made myself a real breakfast. Eggs, bacon, toast with butter. I ate slowly, savoring each bite while imagining their confusion when the mortgage payment didn't appear in their account. After breakfast, I gathered every piece of paper related to their loans from my filing cabinet. Bank statements, loan agreements, receipts for everything from Emma's medical bills to Jessica's car payment. 5 years of documentation, carefully organized and stored. I built a fire in my fireplace for the first time this winter. The flames danced as I fed them page after page of financial records. Each document that burned represented money I would never see again, but also chains I was finally breaking. The last thing I burned was a Christmas card Jessica had sent me last year. On the front was a family photo in front of their beautiful house, the house I was paying for. Inside, in her neat handwriting, "Thank you for everything you do for our family. We're so blessed to have you. Blessed to have my wallet," she meant. I opened a bottle of Macallan 18 that I had been saving for a special occasion. At 67, I decided this qualified. The whiskey was smooth, expensive, everything Jessica's parents would approve of. I toasted my empty living room and my newfound freedom. The phone started ringing around noon. Michael's number flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. "Dad, something's wrong with a mortgage payment. Can you call me back?" The second call came an hour later. Then a third, each voicemail more frantic than the last. "Dad, the bank says the payment was canceled. This has to be a mistake. Please call me immediately." By evening, Jessica had joined the chorus. Her voicemail was different from Michael's panicked tone. "Robert, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you need to fix this immediately. We have obligations, responsibilities. You can't just stop paying without notice." Without notice, as if 5 years of my generosity entitled them to advance warning before I stopped funding their lifestyle. I spent the evening reading a book Sarah had given me years ago, The Count of Monte Cristo, the story of a man who discovered the true nature of those around him and decided to take control of his own destiny. How fitting. Around 10 p.m., my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see Michael on my front porch, still in his work clothes, looking desperate. I opened the door. "Dad, thank God. There's been some kind of banking error. The mortgage payment didn't go through today." "There's no error, Michael." His face went pale. "What do you mean?" I canceled the automatic payment this morning. Permanently. But why? What's wrong? Did something happen?" I looked at my son, this man I had raised and loved and sacrificed for, and saw a stranger. Someone who could exclude his own father from Christmas dinner, but couldn't imagine why that father might stop bankrolling his life. "Your wife called last night to clarify things about Christmas. She was very thorough in explaining why I'm not welcome." "Dad, that's just Jessica being, you know how she is." "It doesn't mean anything." "It means everything, Michael. She made it very clear what your family thinks of me. What you think of me. That's not true. I love you, Dad. You love my money, Michael. There's a difference." His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. For the first time in years, I felt completely calm. "The payment arrangement is over. Permanently. You're adults. Figure it out." I closed the door and turned off the porch light, leaving him standing in the darkness. The next morning, I was enjoying my second cup of coffee when the phone rang. Jessica's number again. This time, I answered. "Robert, we need to talk about yesterday's tantrum." Tantrum, like I was a toddler who had thrown toys instead of a man who had stopped funding their disrespect. "What can I do for you, Jessica?" "My parents' flight lands at 2:30 p.m. today. You need to pick them up at the airport." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Excuse me." "Their flight from Hartford. Continental Airlines, Gate B7. Richard and Patricia Morrison. They're expecting someone to meet them. And why would I be picking them up?" "Because Michael has to work, and I need to prepare for their arrival. The house has to be perfect. The house I was no longer paying for," I thought. "Can't they take a taxi?" "A taxi?" Her voice rose an octave. "Robert, these are distinguished people. My father is a retired federal judge. My mother chairs the hospital auxiliary. They don't take taxis like common travelers. Common travelers, like me, Presumably. Besides, she continued, it's the least you can do after yesterday's childish behavior. You nearly gave Michael a heart attack. I see. So let me understand this correctly. You don't want me at Christmas dinner because I'm not sophisticated enough for your parents, but I'm good enough to be their chauffeur. Don't be dramatic, Robert. It's just a simple favor. What kind of car should I drive? Will my old Honda embarrass your distinguished parents? Actually, yes. Could you maybe rent something appropriate? Nothing fancy, just something that doesn't look like it belongs in a junkyard. The audacity was breathtaking. She wanted me to rent a car to pick up the people who considered me too low-class for their Christmas dinner. And Robert? Please wear something nice. Not those old khakis and flannel shirts. Maybe that navy suit you wore to Emma's baptism? And make sure you shower and shave properly. First impressions matter. Anything else? Just remember, you're representing our family when you meet them. Try to be polite, respectful. Don't mention your work or talk too much about yourself. They're not interested in maintenance stories. She paused, and I could hear her typing something. Oh, and one more thing. If they ask about your relationship to the family, just say you're helping out. Don't make it sound like you're Emma's grandfather or anything that might confuse them. Don't mention that I'm Emma's grandfather. Right? It's just easier that way. Less complicated. Less complicated for whom? For everyone, Robert. Look, I know this seems strange, but my parents have very specific ideas about family structure. They believe in traditional boundaries. Traditional boundaries that apparently included taking my money but not acknowledging my existence. So, I'll see you at 2:30, she asked, as if my compliance was a foregone conclusion. Actually, Jessica, I have other plans today. What other plans? You never have plans. I'm learning to have plans. Starting today. Robert, this isn't negotiable. My parents are expecting to be met at the airport. Then I suggest you rearrange your schedule to meet them yourself. But I told you, I have to prepare the house. And I told you, I have other plans. What plans? What could possibly be more important than this? I looked out my window at the December afternoon, at the world I had been too busy paying their bills to enjoy. I'm planning to sit in my simple, unsophisticated living room, drinking coffee from my discount store mugs, and enjoying the peace and quiet of not being treated like hired help. You're being ridiculous. Selfish. After everything we've done for you. Everything they had done for me. That was rich. Goodbye, Jessica. Don't you dare hang up on me. Robert. I hung up and turned off my phone. For the first time in years, my afternoon was completely my own. I spent the most peaceful afternoon I'd had in years. At 2:30 p.m., while Richard and Patricia Morrison were presumably waiting at Gate B7, I was in my backyard raking leaves. At 3 p.m., while they were probably wondering where their chauffeur was, I was inside making a grilled cheese sandwich. At 4 p.m., I was watching old episodes of The Andy Griffith Show and feeling genuinely content. My phone, which I had turned back on around 5 o'clock, showed 17 missed calls and 11 voicemails. I deleted them all without listening. The doorbell started ringing at 6:15 p.m. Then the pounding began. Open this door right now. I looked through the peephole and saw Jessica flanked by two people who could only be her parents. Richard Morrison was tall and thin with silver hair and the kind of bearing that screamed old money. Patricia was elegant in that particular way wealthy women achieve. Every detail perfect, every accessory carefully chosen. I opened the door with a smile. Good evening. You must be the Morrisons. You. Jessica pushed past me into my living room. Do you have any idea what you've done? Richard and Patricia followed, their faces masks of controlled outrage. Patricia's eyes swept my modest furniture with the kind of look usually reserved for roadkill. Mr. Thompson, Richard began in a voice that could have frozen water, your behavior today was unconscionable. We waited at that airport for 3 hours. 3 hours in that dreadful place, Patricia added, her Connecticut accent sharp enough to cut glass. With all those people, the smell was simply overwhelming. I apologize for your inconvenience, I said calmly. Would you like some coffee? I have some excellent store-brand coffee that's quite adequate. Jessica's face turned red. Stop being sarcastic. This isn't funny. You're absolutely right, I agreed. There's nothing funny about distinguished people like your parents having to take a taxi like common travelers. Richard stepped forward, his judge's demeanor fully engaged. Young man, I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but it ends now. Jessica has explained your arrangement with Michael. You will resume your financial obligations immediately, and you will treat this family with the respect we deserve. The respect you deserve, I repeated thoughtfully. That's right, Patricia chimed in. We understand you've been helping with a mortgage. That's very generous of you, but it doesn't give you the right to embarrass us or inconvenience us. Helping with the mortgage, I said. Is that how Jessica described it? Robert, Jessica warned. Don't make this worse than it already is. But I was just getting started. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, did Jessica mention that I've paid their entire mortgage for 5 years? Not helped with it. Paid it. All of it. The room went quiet. Did she mention the down payment I provided? The car I bought? The medical bills I covered? The credit card debt I cleared? Richard's expression shifted slightly. That's very generous, but... Generous. I interrupted. Yes, it was. Very generous. $250,000 generous. Patricia's perfectly composed face showed the first crack. $250,000. Give or take. I can show you the receipts, but I burned most of them yesterday. You burned them? Jessica squeaked. Along with any obligation, I had to continue funding your lifestyle. Richard tried to regain control. Now see here, Thompson. Whatever arrangement you had with Michael is between you and him. But your behavior today was unacceptable, and it stops now. You're absolutely right, Mr. Morrison. It does stop now. All of it stops now. What do you mean? Patricia asked. I mean no more mortgage payments. No more emergency loans. No more Christmas gifts you never thank me for. No more free babysitting you never appreciate. And definitely no more airport pickup service for people who think I'm too low class to share their dinner table. The silence that followed was deafening. You need to leave my house now, I said quietly. Your house. Jessica exploded. This pathetic little shack. You think you can threaten us from this dump? I walked to the door and opened it. Goodbye. They filed out, Richard muttering threats about lawyers and consequences. But as they reached their rented car, I heard Patricia whisper to her daughter, Jessica, exactly how much money has this man been giving you? The answer to that question was going to make for an interesting evening at their house. I woke up Sunday morning to find a local newspaper on my driveway, which was unusual since I had canceled my subscription months ago to save money. The headline made my blood run cold. Local man abandons elderly visitors during dangerous storm. My hand shook as I read the article. According to the piece, written by someone named Marcus Chun, I was Robert Thompson, an unstable individual who had deliberately left two defenseless elderly travelers stranded at the airport during what the article called severe weather conditions. There had been no storm. The weather had been clear and mild. The article painted Richard and Patricia Morrison as victims of my erratic and concerning behavior. It mentioned Richard's distinguished career as a federal judge and Patricia's charitable work, describing them as pillar of the community individuals who had come to visit family during the holiday season. The piece quoted Jessica extensively. She described me as someone who had become increasingly volatile and unpredictable in recent months. She mentioned my financial difficulties and suggested I might be suffering from age-related mental decline. There was a photo. Somehow they had obtained a grainy picture of me from somewhere. I looked disheveled and angry. The caption read, Robert Thompson, whose family members are concerned about his recent behavior. The article mentioned my address, my full name, my age, everything someone would need to find me. But the worst part was the ending. Marcus Chun had written, local authorities are aware of the situation and monitoring Mr. Thompson's welfare. Family members report that he has made concerning statements about getting even and making people pay. I had never made any such statements. By noon, I had received 3 calls from reporters wanting to interview me about my side of the story. A neighbor knocked on my door to ask if I was feeling all right. The mail carrier gave me a concerned look when he delivered my mail. I was being destroyed in the court of public opinion by people who had spent 5 years taking my money while treating me like garbage. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I researched. I spent hours on my computer, learning everything I could about Richard Morrison, Patricia Morrison, and their daughter Jessica. Richard Morrison had indeed been a federal judge, but he had retired under what several legal blogs described as ethical questions related to conflicts of interest. Nothing proven, but enough smoke to suggest fire. Patricia Morrison's charitable work was real, but her organization had been criticized for excessive administrative costs and lavish fundraising events that seemed to benefit the organizers more than the intended recipients. Jessica's master's degree, which I had helped finance, was from an online program that several education websites ranked as borderline fraudulent. But the most interesting discovery was their financial situation. Public records showed that Richard and Patricia's Connecticut home was heavily mortgaged. Their old money lifestyle was apparently funded by very new debt. Jessica's social media accounts, which I had never bothered to look at before, told a fascinating story. Photos of expensive vacations, designer clothes, luxury restaurants. All posted in the last 5 years. All coinciding with my financial support. She had been documenting her lifestyle upgrade while portraying me as unstable. I printed everything. Bank records, social media screenshots, public documents, news articles. I organized it all in a folder labeled Evidence. The article had mentioned that I was making concerning statements about getting even. They were right about one thing. I was planning to get even, but not in the way they expected. I was going to get even by telling the truth. All of it, with documentation. The question was, where and when would the truth have maximum impact? Christmas dinner seemed like the perfect opportunity. I spent the next 3 days like a detective building a case. Every morning, I woke up with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. My dining room table became command central, covered with printed documents, highlighted bank statements, and a timeline I was constructing of 5 years of financial manipulation. The social media investigation was particularly revealing. Jessica's Instagram account was a masterclass in lifestyle fraud. Photos from their trip to Napa Valley, funded by my emergency loan when Michael was between jobs. Designer handbags that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Restaurant meals that could have fed me for a week. Each post had dozens of comments from friends praising their blessed life and asking about Jessica's style secrets. She had built an entire online persona around money that came from my refinanced mortgage and delayed retirement. But the most damaging evidence was in her own words. I found posts where she complained about family drama and difficult people who don't understand boundaries. One post from last Christmas showed their beautifully decorated tree with a caption, "So grateful for our perfect little family. No toxic energy allowed in our home." Posted the same day, she had uninvited me from Christmas dinner. I also discovered that Richard Morrison's judicial retirement was more controversial than I initially thought. A deeper search revealed newspaper articles about a case where he had failed to recuse himself despite having financial ties to one of the parties. The ethics investigation had been quietly closed, but the damage to his reputation was clear. Patricia's charity work also had some interesting details. The hospital auxiliary she chaired had been questioned by local media about the percentage of donations that actually reached patients versus the amount spent on administrative costs and awareness events at expensive venues. They weren't the pillars of society Jessica had portrayed. They were just better at hiding their flaws behind expensive clothes and Connecticut addresses. On Wednesday, I drove past Michael's house. There were cars in the driveway I didn't recognize. Expensive cars. BMW, Mercedes, Lexus. The Christmas party was apparently proceeding as planned, funded by credit cards they could no longer afford to pay. I imagined the conversations inside. How were they explaining the missed mortgage payment? How were they planning to maintain their lifestyle without my support? Were they hoping I would come crawling back, apologetic and checkbook in hand? That evening, I made a phone call to Patricia Morrison. I had found their Connecticut number in the white pages. "Mrs. Morrison, this is Robert Thompson." The line went silent for several seconds. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice icy. "I wanted to apologize for the airport situation. You were right. It was inappropriate." Another pause. "Well, I'm surprised to hear you say that. I've been doing some thinking, and I realize I overreacted. I'd like to make it up to you. How do you propose to do that? I was wondering if I could join you for Christmas dinner after all. I know Jessica said it wasn't appropriate, but I thought maybe if I asked you directly." "I don't think that's a good idea, Mr. Thompson." Jessica explained the situation, and frankly, after your behavior this week, I understand your concerns, but I've been supporting Michael's family for 5 years. I just thought, well, it would mean a lot to an old man to spend Christmas with his granddaughter. The manipulation was working. I could hear uncertainty in her voice. 5 years, you said? Every month. The mortgage, the car payment, medical bills. I have all the documentation if you're interested. Another long pause. How much documentation? Every receipt, Mrs. Morrison. Every bank transfer. Every loan. It's quite extensive. I think perhaps we should discuss this further. I'd be happy to show you everything. Christmas Day would be perfect timing. By the time I hung up, Patricia Morrison was very interested in seeing my documentation. She was also very interested in having a private conversation with me about her daughter's financial arrangements. The trap was set. Christmas dinner was back on. Christmas Eve morning, I prepared like a general planning a decisive battle. I had spent the previous evening creating individual packets of evidence, each one tailored for maximum impact. Packet 1 contained 5 years of bank statements showing the mortgage payments, highlighted in yellow. Every $2,800 transfer, every month, without fail. The total at the bottom, $168,000. Packet 2 was the loan documents. The $25,000 down payment, the $18,000 car loan, the $8,000 in medical bills, the $12,000 credit card payoff. All with Michael and Jessica's signatures requesting the money, promising to repay it. Packet 3 was the most devastating. Jessica's social media posts. Screenshots of expensive vacations, designer purchases, restaurant meals, all time-stamped and cross-referenced with my financial support. Each post showed the date and my corresponding bank transfer that had made it possible. Packet 4 contained the newspaper articles about Richard's judicial ethics investigation and Patricia's charity controversies. Public records I had legally obtained that painted a very different picture than their carefully crafted image. Packet 5 was my masterpiece, a detailed financial analysis showing that without my support, Michael and Jessica's lifestyle was completely unsustainable. Their credit card debt was mounting, their savings were non-existent, and their combined income couldn't support their spending habits. I had 12 copies of everything, one for each person who would be at dinner. According to the guest list I had cleverly extracted from Jessica during our phone conversation about bringing enough wine for everyone. The guest list was perfect for my purposes. Patricia and Richard Morrison, Jessica's brother David and his wife Karen, 2 couples from Jessica's book club, Michael's boss and his wife, and a neighbor family with teenage children. 12 people who thought they knew the story, about to learn the truth. I dressed carefully that morning. The navy suit Jessica had suggested, my best shoes, a conservative tie. I wanted to look respectable, competent, sane. Everything the newspaper article had suggested I wasn't. At 3 p.m., I loaded my car with the evidence packets and a bottle of expensive wine. Ironically, the same brand I'd seen Jessica post about on Instagram after one of their funded vacations. The drive to their house felt different this time. Instead of the nervous anticipation of previous visits, I felt calm, focused, ready. This was going to be the most honest conversation our family had ever had. I parked across the street and sat in my car for a moment, looking at the house I had helped purchase. The Christmas lights twinkled cheerfully, the wreaths on the windows were perfectly arranged, and through the large front window, I could see people laughing and talking, wine glasses in hand. They were having a wonderful time, spending money they didn't have, in a house they couldn't afford, celebrating a holiday they had specifically excluded me from. I picked up the box of evidence packets and walked to the front door. Through the glass, I could see Jessica in a beautiful red dress that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check. She was gesturing animatedly, telling some story that had everyone's attention. Perfect. I wanted everyone's attention for what came next. I rang the doorbell and waited, my heart surprisingly steady. The time for being the dismissed, disrespected father-in-law was over. Today, I was going to be something much more dangerous, a man with nothing left to lose and all the documentation to prove it. Michael opened the door, his face cycling through surprise, confusion, and panic in rapid succession. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "Your mother-in-law invited me," I said calmly, holding up the wine bottle. "I brought something for the table." Behind him, I could see the dinner party in full swing. The dining room table was set with what looked like Patricia's fine china, crystal glasses catching the light from an elaborate chandelier. The guests were exactly as I had expected. Well-dressed, sophisticated-looking people who clearly believed they were better than a maintenance worker from the wrong side of town. "Robert." Patricia appeared behind Michael, her smile bright, but her eyes wary. "How wonderful that you could make it after all." Jessica materialized next to her, her face white with shock. "What is he doing here?" "I invited him, dear," Patricia said smoothly. "After our conversation yesterday, I thought it was only right." The room went quiet as I entered. 12 faces turned toward me, some curious, others clearly wondering who this stranger was and why he was interrupting their elegant evening. "Everyone," Patricia announced, "this is Robert Thompson, Michael's father." A few polite nods, some forced smiles. I could see them taking in my modest suit, my discount store shoes, my working-class appearance. Exactly what Jessica had warned them about. "Robert has brought some materials he'd like to share with us," Patricia continued, her eyes fixed on the box in my hands. "Something about the family's financial arrangements." Jessica made a small choking sound. "How interesting," said a woman I recognized from Jessica's Instagram as book club member Amanda. "What kind of materials?" I set the box on the coffee table and began distributing the packets, one to each person. "These are documentation packets," I explained in my calmest voice. "They detail my financial relationship with Michael and Jessica over the past 5 years." "Dad, don't do this," Michael whispered, but I was already opening my own packet. For those who don't know me, I'm Robert Thompson. I worked as a maintenance supervisor for 40 years before retiring. I'm also Emma's grandfather, though I wasn't invited to this dinner because Jessica felt I wouldn't fit in with such sophisticated company. Uncomfortable glances around the room. However, what you might find interesting is that I've been the sole financial support for this household for 5 years. Every mortgage payment, every major expense, every luxury you see in this beautiful home. I held up the first bank statement. The mortgage payment is $2,800 per month. I've paid every single one for 60 months. That's $168,000. Several people opened their packets and began examining the highlighted statements. The down payment was $25,000. Jessica's car loan was $18,000. Medical bills, credit card debt, various emergencies, it all adds up to approximately $231,000 over 5 years. The room was dead silent now. Everyone was looking at the documents, then at Jessica and Michael, then back at the documents. "Dad, please stop," Michael begged. "Now, you might wonder why someone would be so generous," I continued. "The answer is simple. I thought I was helping family. I thought I was being a good father and grandfather." I pulled out the social media screenshots. But as you can see in Packet 3, that generosity funded quite a lifestyle. Expensive vacations, designer clothes, luxury dining, all documented on social media, all paid for with my retirement savings. Amanda was staring at a screenshot of Jessica's Napa Valley vacation. "This is from your Instagram, Jess. You said you saved up for this trip." "The final packet," I said, "contains information about why I was excluded from this dinner. According to Jessica, I'm not sophisticated enough. I'm just a maintenance worker who wouldn't understand conversations about art and literature." I looked directly at Richard Morrison. "Of course, that was before I learned about your own recent legal troubles, Judge Morrison, or your wife's charity scandal, Mrs. Morrison." Both their faces flushed red. "So here we are," I concluded. "A $250,000 truth bomb, served with your Christmas dinner." The silence stretched until finally, Michael's boss, a man named Gerald, spoke up. Is this all true, Michael?" Before Michael could answer, Jessica exploded. Get out of my house right now." "Actually," I said pleasantly, "it's my house. I've been paying for it." 3 months later, I was in my garden planting tomatoes when Michael's car pulled into my driveway. I had been expecting this visit for weeks, ever since I heard through my sister that their house was in foreclosure. He looked terrible. Thinner, older, with dark circles under his eyes and the defeated posture of a man who had lost everything that mattered. "Dad," I continued planting, not looking up. "Hello, Michael. Can we talk?" "We're talking." He stood there for a long moment, watching me work. Finally, he sat down heavily on my back steps. "The house is gone. Foreclosure sale is next week." I nodded. "I heard. Jessica left me. Took Emma to her parents' house in Connecticut. She filed for divorce yesterday." This was news. I looked up from my tomatoes. "I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? After what she did to you? After what I let her do to you?" I sat back on my heels, studying my son. He looked broken, genuinely remorseful in a way I hadn't seen since he was a child caught in a serious lie. "What happened at Christmas dinner, Michael? After I left?" He laughed bitterly. "It was a disaster. Total meltdown. Jessica started screaming at everyone, calling them traitors for listening to you. Patricia and Richard tried to salvage the situation, but your evidence packets were pretty damning. And the guests? Gone within an hour. Gerald, my boss, he was furious. Said he couldn't trust someone who would take advantage of their elderly father. I got demoted the next week." Michael rubbed his face with both hands. "Jessica's book club friends stopped talking to her. The neighbor family won't speak to us. Everyone in the neighborhood knows what we did to you." "What you did to yourselves," I corrected gently. "You're right. Dad, I need you to know I never wanted to exclude you from Christmas. That was all Jessica and her parents. I was weak. I went along with it, but I never wanted that." "Why didn't you stop it?" "Because I was scared. Scared of losing her. Scared of losing the lifestyle. Scared of having to actually work for what we had instead of just taking your money." He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "I lost my family, Dad. My real family. I lost you, and for what? For people who dropped me the minute things got difficult. You haven't lost me, Michael. Haven't I? After everything we put you through?" I stood up, dusting dirt off my knees. "You made terrible choices. You let your wife treat me like garbage for years. You took my money while showing me no respect. You excluded me from my granddaughter's life." He nodded miserably. "But you're still my son. The question is, what are you going to do now?" I don't know. I'm living in a studio apartment across town. I can barely afford it on my reduced salary. Jessica won't let me see Emma unless I agree to her financial demands, which I can't meet. And you want me to fix it? No. His answer surprised me. No, Dad. I want to fix it myself. I want to earn back your respect, your trust, your love. I don't know how, but I want to try. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation, of the old Michael who would say anything to get what he wanted. What I saw instead was genuine remorse, and something I hadn't seen in years. Humility. It won't be easy. I know. No more money from me. No loans, no bailouts, no emergencies. I understand. You'll have to rebuild your relationship with Emma on your own. I won't interfere, but I also won't finance your custody battle. I know. I walked over to my tool shed and pulled out a second pair of gardening gloves. If you're serious about this, you can start by helping me finish planting these tomatoes. He took the gloves without hesitation. We worked in silence for an hour, father and son together for the first time in years. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a beginning. 1 year later, I was hosting Thanksgiving dinner in my modest dining room. The table was set for 8. Myself, Michael, my sister Janet and her husband Bob from Ohio, my neighbor Mrs. Chun and her teenage grandson, and surprisingly, my old friend Pete from work with his wife Marie. The turkey was perfect, Sarah's recipe, with sage stuffing, just the way I remembered. Michael had helped with the cooking, something he had never done before this year. Dad, should I start carving? He asked, and I nodded. The past year had been a journey for both of us. Michael had moved into a small apartment near his work and taken a second job at a hardware store on weekends. He was paying his own bills for the first time in years, learning to live within his means. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago. Jessica had moved to Connecticut permanently, taking Emma with her. Michael saw his daughter every other weekend when he could afford the trip, staying in budget motels and taking her to free activities like parks and libraries. It wasn't the life he had planned, but it was honest. Robert, this stuffing is incredible, Marie said. What's your secret? It was my wife's recipe. She always said the key was to add the sage at just the right moment. Michael looked up from carving. Mom taught me that recipe when I was 12. I'd forgotten until Dad reminded me. We had been rebuilding our relationship slowly, carefully. No grand gestures, no dramatic reconciliations. Instead, we had Sunday dinners together. He helped me with yard work. I taught him how to change his car's oil, something he had never learned because money had always solved every problem. Any word from Emma? Janet asked gently. Michael's face brightened. She's been writing me letters. Real letters with crayons and stickers. Jessica can control the phone calls and visits, but she can't stop a 5-year-old from loving her daddy. He pulled out his wallet and showed us the latest drawing, a stick figure family labeled me and Daddy and Grandpa Robert. Emma had never forgotten me, despite everything. She asks about you all the time, Dad. Wants to know when she can see your house, meet your friends. Maybe next summer, I said carefully, when the legal situation is more settled. The custody battle was ongoing, but Michael was fighting it himself, with a public defender, learning to advocate for his own rights instead of throwing money at problems. As for Jessica and her parents, their story had taken an interesting turn. Richard Morrison's legal troubles had escalated into a full investigation, and Patricia's charity had been dissolved amid allegations of financial misconduct. Their Connecticut house had been quietly sold, and according to local gossip, they were living in a much more modest situation. Jessica was working as a substitute teacher and living with her parents in a rental apartment. The designer lifestyle had evaporated along with my financial support. Her social media accounts had gone dark after Christmas dinner. Whatever happened to that newspaper reporter who wrote that awful article about you? Mrs. Chun asked. Marcus Chun. I smiled. Turns out he was Richard Morrison's nephew. He lost his job when the editor discovered the family connection and the complete lack of fact-checking. He's working at a small weekly paper upstate now. Karma, Pete said with satisfaction. After dinner, Michael and I were washing dishes when he asked quietly, Do you think you'll ever fully forgive me, Dad? I consider the question carefully. I think forgiveness is a process, not an event. Every Sunday dinner we share, every honest conversation we have, every time you choose integrity over convenience, that's forgiveness happening. I miss so much time with you. So many years wasted. We can't change the past, Michael, but we can decide what the future looks like. He nodded, scrubbing a plate with unusual intensity. I want Emma to know her grandfather. The real you, not the version Jessica created in her head. She will, when the time is right. As the evening wound down and our guests prepared to leave, Mrs. Chun pulled me aside. Robert, I want you to know, watching you this past year has been inspiring. You could have been bitter, vengeful. Instead, you chose dignity. I chose peace, I corrected. For the first time in years, I have peace. After everyone left, Michael and I sat on my front porch despite the November chill. The street was quiet, my neighborhood looking exactly as modest as it always had. But somehow it felt richer now. Dad, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you regret it? Any of it? The money, the years of support, even a dramatic Christmas dinner confrontation? I thought about it for a long moment. I regret the way I was treated. I regret enabling behavior that wasn't good for any of us. But I don't regret the love that motivated it, even when that love was misguided. And the Christmas dinner? I smiled. That was probably the most honest conversation our family ever had. Sometimes the truth needs a dramatic entrance to be heard. Michael laughed, the first genuine laugh I had heard from him in years. What's next for us, Dad? We keep building, one day at a time, one Sunday dinner at a time. And someday, when Emma is old enough to understand, we tell her the whole story, the good parts and the difficult parts. Will you tell her about the money? I'll tell her that love sometimes makes us do foolish things, but that doesn't make the love any less real. As Michael drove away that night, I stood in my doorway watching his taillights disappear. The house was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet now. Not the silence of loneliness, but the peace of a man who had reclaimed his dignity and discovered that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find out what truly matters. I had my son back. I had my self-respect back. And someday, I would have my granddaughter back too. The story that began with a rejected Christmas invitation had become something much more valuable. A second chance at authentic family relationships, built on truth instead of financial obligation. At 68 years old, I was finally learning that the best gifts can't be bought, they can only be earned.